it's not too dissimilar to going into a supermarket and getting stuck on one of those nasty scanner machines that just won't let you scan something, and or you try and buy a bottle of beer and you're in a hurry and you have to wait for 30 minutes for the guy to come over and sort of approve it,
confirm that you're over 21.
Over 21. But, it's
I get that all the time. He has to give me a good long look as well. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Just to remind you that if you're watching on Facebook or on, what else do we watch on YouTube? Do we have it on YouTube?
Facebook or the site.
Mostly. The site, that's it. We don't do YouTube. Then you can listen to it on SoundCloud or on iTunes, and if you listen to it, you can watch it not on YouTube but on the site.
What's wrong with YouTube?
We just don't seem to do it, do we?
No, we are. It's just not that much.
It's a Pierre choice.
Our audience is not really there.
Perhaps we should work on our YouTube channel. Write in and let us know if we should work on our YouTube channel. And I'm just with Iain again this week because Jamie's still on holiday.
Still in Thailand.
Just wonder if he ever does anything.
The Hangover Part 3.
He's still in Thailand.
Part
he's
2.
there at an interesting time. They've got all that drama going on with those kids in the cave.
Oh God, I forgot about that.
It's been a week now. Yeah.
I wonder if they'll.
Hopefully, I think they're just fishing them out right now.
They got 4 of them, and the 5th one, I think.
We shouldn't talk about too much because something awful might happen by the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so, but he's not here.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to Iain, which is great. And of course, Pierre will pitch in as he increasingly does.
Yeah.
And this week we're going to talk about Orange Romania. We're going to talk about ZTE yet again. And we think we might have got to chapter 11 of the ZTE saga.
Boom.
And we're going to talk about content and might go off on a sporty tangent because there's a lot of sport going on at the moment. So Orange Romania, I'll pretty much hand it over to you, Iain. I was invited, but I should announce actually we've got a new member of the team. He doesn't feel like he's quite ready to do podcasts yet, but Wei Shi has joined. He's the head of Telecoms.com intelligence content side of things, and a really experienced guy.
He's the smart one.
He's the one who's actually got some qualifications. He's not a complete dilettante winging it. And that's why I didn't go to Romania with Orange because it was his first day. But you did, Iain, so why don't you tell us what you got up to?
Yeah, I went over to Transylvania actually.
Cool.
In Romania, which is really nice. Very.
Was it crazy hot this time of year?
It was hot, but it wasn't as hot as here.
Huh.
Right.
And it's very beautiful. But obviously, it wasn't just for sightseeing. It was to do some testing report on the results of some 5G tests that they've done. So it's more of the old sort of 5G stuff, but getting closer and closer to.
So why is Romania suddenly the place for 5G?
They're quite interested in it over there. So they seem to be running a bunch of trials throughout Europe at the moment, Orange, and what they're doing in Romania specifically is trials of 5G as a kind of alternative to fixed broadband. So similar to what Verizon's doing in the US.
Right, and fixed wireless access.
Fixed wireless access is like the industry term for it. But there's kind of quite low penetration of fixed line broadband networks in Romania compared to like more advanced.
Even just copper.
Yeah, I mean it seems to be quite a fragmented market.
Right.
And certainly in terms of the more advanced stuff. So I'm guessing that means more sophisticated copper networks that are based on rolling out some fibre and definitely fibres to home.
Yeah.
It's quite unavailable even in some cities. And certainly if you go out to rural areas, there's not much at all, and it seems like the way they're talking about it is mainly to kind of connect homes in rural areas, instead of having to obviously kind of dig up and lay fibre lines, which is really expensive to do.
Yeah, and the basic rationale behind fixed wireless access seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Why do all that digging?
Apparently they're already
if you can do it wirelessly.
So this is the interesting thing about Orange. They've got quite a small presence in the broadband market. They've got about 200,000 customers. Right. They don't own the incumbent. That's Deutsche Telekom owns the former sort of state-owned monopoly. Yeah. And so they have an agreement with DT for sort of, I don't know if it's unbundling, but certainly a kind of wholesale arrangement to use DT's fixed broadband network. But they don't seem to have very many customers on it. They've got 200,000 broadband customers, and 150,000 of them are using 4G to get their broadband. So they've obviously already made steps to use mobile technologies as an alternative to fixed line, and it's kind of a successor to that, I guess. And it's kind of what we've been talking about on the pod for ages. It's not it's not all that exciting. It's just a better way of doing it than 4G.
So one thing, we may have spoken about this before, but it's worth sort of clarifying. So fixed wireless access on one level seems like a complete no-brainer.
Yeah.
Why do all that hassle? But there's got to be some downsides, and a couple of downsides occur to me. One of them is, potential sort of propagation issues, trees and that sort of stuff, because it has to be like a line of sight.
Yeah, it's really high gigahertz. So they've got an experimental license at 26 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And I think the Romanian regulator's planning on having an auction late next year for that spectrum. And then they're saying they could potentially do stuff in 2020.
Yeah.
But it doesn't carry signals very far. So that is, they've been using...
Yeah, so as an answer to rural, it's great on one level, but as you say, the radius...
The radius isn't much. It doesn't sound like they can get a huge number of homes in per kind of cell site, I guess, per site. And they're using like outdoor customer premises equipment to kind of get over that propagation issue, I think, like a mixture of indoor and outdoor customer premises equipment.
I see. What, to sort of
so
boost it?
So it goes to something on the outside of the house, basically, and then I guess you have
wired from the outside to the inside,
and then it's Wi-Fi once it's indoors.
Yeah.
You're not kind of, obviously there's no devices yet, so you're not using 5G smartphones in the house. You're just using your standard TV that might be a smart TV or a laptop or whatever it is over Wi-Fi. But they don't. The thing is, they've done these trials, and from a technical standpoint, the trials have gone really, really well. Like all the feedback that we were shown, the customers seem to be delighted with it. It works really well. Some of them said it's even better than their fixed broadband stuff they're getting, but they don't seem to have very many answers when it comes to the business case at the moment. Do the costs actually stack up?
Right.
It's obviously, you would think, obviously, it's going to be better than digging up
think it'd be cheaper,
trenches and laying kind of fibre lines, but I did ask them what's the difference in terms of cost per home passed or whatever, and they didn't have any figures.
A bit cagey,
and the CEO herself sort of said, we're still not at the stage of actually talking about the business case for this, a return on investment. So that's the big question.
So it's a sort of lovely idea, but
technically it seems to work really, really well. It's just whether they can get the numbers to kind of add up for it.
Talking about CEO, I read your story you wrote from there, and you had a picture with a caption. You had the CEO, and then you had one guy. What was his surname?
Yeah, his surname's like Vampiris.
Yeah, because I was sitting there making all the predictable jokes about Transylvania and Dracula and vampires and all that sort of thing. And there's actually an Orange exec called Vampirus or something like that.
Yeah,
although you can't make it up, can you?
No, it's brilliant that he was out there.
Yeah, he's probably got nothing to do with any of it. They just said, let's get him out. We haven't got any Draculas, but we've got a Vampirus.
I'm told it's pronounced Vampui. And I did go around a lot saying it's great that you've got someone out here whose surname's Vampires, but no one really laughed very much. So I gave it up after a while.
I would have been with you on not making people laugh front if I'd been there, I think.
But,
okay.
But they did a bunch of smart city stuff over there as well. So there was day one was the kind of results of these 5G trials they've been doing, and then day two we got taken around this city called Alba Iulia, which is one of the main cities in Transylvania. It's quite historic. But it's also it's like a sort of hotbed for a lot of the smart city stuff that's going on. So they have connected buses there.
Okay, because it's a sort of manageable size, I guess.
Yeah, it's manageable. So they've got smart lighting being trialled. They've got sort of air monitoring to see what pollution levels are like. And we got shown all of this. We got shown the kind of software companies that they're working with and how they monitor a lot of this stuff. And you could actually go out and see the kind of LoRa equipment on top of the street lighting and everything. So it's quite interesting.
And the take with it, as with a lot of IoT with smart city, it's not so much end user benefit, it's more sort of infrastructure and cost efficiencies and
I think they think there'll be both. There'll be kind of benefits for if you can do things like smart parking, I guess, and
which is just park wherever you want and not have to worry about meters and
then maybe some of the efficiencies in things like smart lighting do get passed on to people.
I tell you, that's one thing. You should talk about smart parking. Smart parking is a nice way of putting it, but if you like anyone who's ever tried to park in London, for example, it's such a racket, isn't it?
Yeah.
I used to have a house in London. I couldn't even park outside my own house.
Yeah.
Because without paying the council loads of money, and I wonder when we start getting smart parking, are you just going to be racking up fees for just driving around and all that sort of thing when cars are fully IoT'd up?
Yeah.
The potential for them to start billing you for regular stuff that they're not billing you for now seems quite big.
Yeah, although some people think there's be fewer cars, don't they? The whole kind of connected car, self-driving car future promises fewer vehicles because you get carpools and efficiencies that way, but But yeah, I mean, the tests they do on smart cities are interesting from Orange's perspective, I guess. It's not just a sort of altruistic thing. They kind of feel that there's public sector business to be done there and contracts with companies that are interested in this stuff. So even though it's really small scale and there's nothing really commercial at the moment, they do seem to be investing quite a lot of effort into these particular trials in Alba Iulia, and it could potentially be stuff that you see happening elsewhere in Europe eventually, I guess.
And Orange is quite an interesting telecoms group for sort of trying out new stuff.
Yeah.
Because they've got locations like Eastern Europe. They've got quite a big presence in Africa as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
So you get Orange trying stuff out, a bit like Telefonica in Latin America. These big operator groups that have a presence all over the place. And I get the impression that Orange is one of those ones, apart from when just getting you out to the French Open for the hell of it.
Yeah, they do. They seem to have quite a strong sort of R&D commitment compared to a lot of the other European operators in terms of what they sort of invest in that area. And
one thing before I forget, get back to fixed wireless access. So there's the propagation side of it.
Yeah.
But then there's also a capacity side. So fibre has much bigger sort of capacity in general, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to beat that.
Yeah, there's going to be a limit to the amount that one node or whatever.
They're saying the results of the trials were they were getting 3 gigabits per second when there were 4 video streams at the same time in the home. And then they were kind of getting peak speeds of 6 gigabits per second, which is pretty substantial.
Yeah.
So I think anything in excess of a gigabyte at the moment, gigabit per second, is seen as pretty good.
Yeah, but then if you're serving 20 households, is it as simple as divide it by 20?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? It's what you, in a real world setting where you've got, a lot of homes using videos at the same time, I guess the performance is going to degrade. But if you can, it doesn't need to be that good, I suppose. It just needs to be enough for people to get the services that they're using in the house, which are going to be broadband access, these days, like high definition TV, let's say maybe some 4K, but
yes, if you've got 6 gigabit per second pipe and the maths is as simple as I'm making it out to be, which it probably isn't, then you could serve 100 devices at 60, or 1,000 devices at 6.
Yeah, but those fibre networks as well are also shared bandwidth a lot of the time, unless you're doing point to point. It's also if you have a lot of people in a community, you still have limits. It's not the headline speeds aren't what you get. If you have it's basically shared bandwidth, so it's the same issue. Lots of homes end up sharing the peak speeds that are kind of advertised. So they were saying it's fibre grade, and they seem really happy about the technical side of it. It's more a case of making the numbers add up. The guy who's the chief marketing officer gave this really bullish assessment of how big a role he thought it could play in Romania. He actually got asked by Dario Talmesio Ovum, who was on the trip, and said, what are we talking?
There were quite a few analysts on the trip.
There was a few, but he specifically asked, what are we talking about here in terms of substitution of fibre? And this guy, the CMO, said he reckoned it could be used for about 10% of Romanian households in future, which is about 750,000 homes.
Okay.
So it's more than 3 times as many customers as Orange has got at the moment.
And this is very much a 5G thing, is it?
That's 5G.
Yeah.
5G. Yeah. So it could be, could play quite a. I mean, if that's bullish, but if that's realistic, then it's a big role for it in that country.
No, I know. I think it was Verizon in the US has been banging on about fixed wireless access in a.
I mean, the much bigger deal is enhanced mobile broadband, I guess.
Yeah.
And they're talking about trials of that there. But I think what Orange is doing is it picks an area to do, its enhanced mobile broadband trials. And there's a lot of that going on in France as well, I think, in these 3 French cities that they've kind of, I can't remember them off the top
Italy's
of my head.
doing a fair bit
Lille's
as
one
well.
of them. And then Romania is very much where they want to sort of focus the energy with this fixed wireless access stuff, and maybe potentially that FWA could be used in some other bits of Orange's footprint in the future. I don't know, but
I think
Africa, who knows? I don't know. It sounds like it could have a role to play there in the years ahead.
Well, they obviously with 5G they anticipate a time where they feel that they've got wireless bandwidth to burn.
Yeah.
You start really getting into big, like 100, 200, 300 megahertz chunks of high frequency spectrum. And then you can pump a hell of a lot through there.
It just doesn't, like you say, it just doesn't go very far.
So then they're probably trying to think, given that we're going to have this facility, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
How are we going to make some money out of it?
That's an obvious use case.
Yeah.
As they say.
And what about Transylvania? Is it a cool
nice,
place?
yeah.
Did you go out?
Yeah.
Did you get pissed?
Yeah, I mean, we stayed in Alba Iulia, which is this kind of old, it dates back to Roman times,
Right.
and it's really nice. It's very pretty, very scenic, beautiful countryside, and the food's really good. It's very cheap. I think they have the lei is the currency. It's about 5 lei to the pound, and you get a beer for about 5 lei. So
Excellent.
I always base anything on how much.
I think we
pint
can
of beer
agree
costs.
that is
So,
that is the international unit of sort of currency conversion.
yeah, but
Big Mac.
people are really friendly.
Yeah, whereas
the
when
big-
I was
the
in
Big Mac
when I was
there.
in Sweden, you were looking at about 7 or 8 quid for a beer.
Yeah,
I was probably getting ripped off, but still, it's. Although having said that, you get the Prince of Wales feathers over the road, and you're looking at 6 quid for a
Yeah.
beer now. So
yeah,
can't really have a go at the Swedes too much.
yeah.
We're catching up nicely on that one.
We are closing the gap.
So you can
But
have 6 beers there for
It's-
1 beer.
It's worth going
Warren
there
Street.
just to drink, and
Yes.
you make the money that you spent on the airfare and
Well,
accommodation would seem insignificant.
well, I
after.
think you're almost obliged to drink to suicidal excess to make
Yeah.
sure you get maximum value for money.
Yeah, it's cheap as well, accommodation wise. So the hotel we stayed at, which is called Medieval Hotel,
Excellent.
which is really, really nice, like 5-star I think hotel. I heard that the price is about 80 euros a night.
Right.
Usually is what you're looking at sort of peak season. So
It felt nice and luxurious.
yeah.
Was it like the
yeah.
Grand Budapest Hotel? Have you ever seen that film?
I don't think I've seen that.
I recommend it.
That's Hungary.
That's
That's
Hungary.
Hungary, yeah. Same thing, yeah.
Hungary.
It's all
Just
Eastern Europe.
Just round the corner, isn't it? Cool. Okay. Moving on. I just noticed, by the way, you might remember if you watched the podcast last week, they'd left a bottle of Jack Daniels around, and Iain and I couldn't resist. I can't see any Jack Daniels lying around, but there's this sort of bag here. I don't know what that might be for, but they seem to be leaving little presents for
It's
us.
getting worse and worse.
I know. What are we going to see next week? A syringe or something. Okay. What have I been writing about? So yes, there is sort of ZT yet again. We've called it Chapter
Yeah.
11, partly because there's so many chapters of the story, and partly a little clever play on words because that's what they call bankruptcy
Although
in the States. And
it's a kind of positive development for them recently.
yeah.
or-
So they've had basically the US has gone. All right. I know we said that you couldn't do pretty much any. I mean, they called it an export ban, but it's pretty much any commercial
Yeah.
interaction in the US. And they've just gone, okay, all right. For a month, you can do stuff like service your existing things. You can sort of patch smartphones. You can repair networks or whatever it is. ZTE is allowed to do in the States already. But we've still got the export ban, so you can't sort of create new business. I.e., we're letting you put your US-based interests on life support for a month. Now, the assumption from them doing that, other than a bit of horse trading with Trump, and that's obviously the big sort of weird variable in all of this, is the novel way in which Trump goes around about diplomacy, which is very much this transactional sort of do a deal type of stuff. And he's presumably quite interested in giving Xi Jinping and the Chinese state some kind of face saving. But they've got a funny way of going about it because so they've said this, and it seems to be with a view to, if ZT gets its shit together enough, pays its fines, does everything we ask it to, jumps through all the hoops, then maybe we can knock it on the head, but it's not going to happen straight away.
Yeah.
There's all these senators opposed to it.
There's a lot of resistance from both Republicans
and understandably so,
Democrats,
because you
isn't
can't just unilaterally
there? He's
override
been fairly
your own.
heavily criticised, Trump, hasn't he, by a group of senators for
Yeah.
sort of perception that he's gone soft. It seems all of a sudden. On,
There's
on
the
ZTE.
going soft part of it, and they're possibly just using his own rhetoric as a stick to beat him with on that one. But there's also just due process. I mean, apart from the president, you've got all these other
Yeah.
institutions, offices, bureaus, agencies that are in charge of keeping the country running.
Yeah.
And if the president just comes in and goes, "Nah, I'm going to overrule what you just did,"
Yeah.
there's due process implications. There's the morale of that agency. There's what precedent it sets, all that sort of stuff. So I've got some sympathy. You can't, the president can't just come in
Yeah.
and just
That is his way.
let
but-
murderers off and get rid of sort of punishments. And all that. Well, maybe he can. I mean, they do have these executive orders in the States.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is he can't. What I'm really saying is he shouldn't be able to do that
Yeah.
without some degree of accountability. But anyway, that's what he's trying to do. On the flip side, I think we all even though ZTE obviously screwed up and didn't just screw up once but twice with this, dealing with Iran and all that stuff that it got in trouble for, it certainly deserved to be punished, but punished to the degree that without some mitigation would entirely eradicate the entire company seems a bit harsh.
Yeah.
So, if that's set up as a negotiating point from which sort of some kind of compromise is reached, then fair enough. But I don't think it was necessarily Trump's decision to do that punishment. It's this BIS.
Yeah. I think, which is a bit of the Commerce Department, isn't it, basically? But I think the problem that ZTE's got at the moment is the longer this goes on, the more difficult it becomes, doesn't it? It seemed like a good thing a few weeks ago when this deal was announced by the Commerce Department, saying, you pay this fine of $1 billion. It's another hefty fine after they've already paid one last year, but it's better than not being able to operate, obviously. And you put a bit of money to one side in case you need your wrist slapping again and change your management. And it was started trading again. I mean, the share price took a hit immediately, obviously, because of what's been going on. But it sort of seemed, we're moving in the right direction. But we're now at a stage where it's just, there's a lot of uncertainty still surrounding the future of the business. And I noticed last week, I think there was reports that Ericsson had landed this fairly big deal in Italy, and then it was confirmed. Yeah. So this is what. So
what hasn't been explicitly confirmed is the expense of ZTE.
Well, but they were the vendor serving Wind Tre, so it is. And,
okay.
This is the thing we've talked about a few times, I think, is service providers, and we talked to analysts about this as well, panicking and going, if this goes on for much longer, we need,
But why would you take the risk?
Why would you take the risk? You're going to move to a vendor that you know is going to be there in 2 years' time, and you're pretty certain it is. And ZTE, it's apparently there were reports that it's racked up losses of about $3 billion in the last few weeks, while it's been paying staff and nothing's been happening. And all right, they've been able to do some things now, but they're still, there's
so that's only a month reprieve.
Yeah.
So that's by the start of August. So the inference from that 1 month reprieve is either
16 billion for the year.
That's what they've lost. 16 billion.
No, if it's 3 billion per month.
Oh, I see. Sorry, right. You're just doing the maths. The inference is that by the start of August, something more concrete would have been done, but then it could just be this rolling thing.
Yeah.
And God knows they've had to kowtow enough. They've got rid of all their board, replaced 14 board members with 8 new ones, and then they got rid of all their senior management, the president, the CFO, the CTO, and replaced them, albeit with ZTE lifers, although I noticed in their filing they went to great pains to say that they're no way associated with any of the naughtiness.
Former head of some business group, and I remember chatting to Ray about it and saying, hang on a minute, I thought they were supposed to be getting rid of anybody above SVP level, but they're obviously making out that he wasn't at SVP level.
But guessing. I presume at this stage, because the capitulation in the face of US regulators seems to be absolute, I'd be very surprised if ZTE did anything publicly without getting full sign-off from its current overlords.
Yeah, I think the other issue for them with getting rid of so many senior staff, and then presumably the guy who's now CEO, if he wasn't at SVP level, that implies he's reasonably junior in the management scheme of things.
Oh, well, they're lifers. These people have all been there for about 20 years, so you're
losing a lot of expertise, aren't you?
No, definitely.
And people who have business relationships, who have done all the handshaking in the past. This guy's presumably coming into the CEO job. You never normally get someone at that level jumping right up to CEO position, I'm guessing.
These are exceptional But as you said earlier, the choice is between previously inconceivable compromise and death.
Yeah. So I just wonder whether they bring people in from outside ZTE, perhaps.
Well, there seems to be less of that. I mean, the guy they brought in as the HR guy wasn't from ZTE.
Yeah.
But
I mean, even looking to
everyone else is a lifer. Been there
there's
about
other
20
big
years.
Chinese tech companies, obviously. I wondered if someone from one of those.
Maybe they asked around and everyone's like, "No, I'm all right, mate. I'll stay at Alibaba or whatever."
Yeah, well, maybe hard to get people from Alibaba, but
yes. So that's that. They've really done everything. They've got rid of anyone senior.
Yeah.
They're paying tons of money. They're basically saying, look, just name it, we'll do it.
Well, they're presumably going to report fairly soon, aren't they? Because they're trading again, and we would. I'm guessing we'll see earnings coming out at some point from them.
Guess so.
Which is going to be really interesting to see exactly what the impact's been. That'll be one of the more interesting earnings announcements, I guess, for the summer. But the vendor ones are interesting at the moment. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what's happening with with our friends at Ericsson in terms
Yeah, well,
of
definitely. When I was over there with
profitability.
them, it's not Ericsson's style to be sort of triumphalist, but
Yeah.
they were obviously all really chuffed with the last quarterlies.
Yeah,
And there were some real upticks, I think, in terms of profitability or something like
Yeah.
that. But they're all the first to concede that all that's bullshit if we don't repeat it.
yeah.
So for that reason alone, the next lot of Ericsson.
And I think
I wonder if
there's-
I'm going to be on holiday then.
There's probably some wariness about this. What sounds like a good thing for Ericsson and Nokia with all these problems that the Chinese guys are having. I think it was our friend Bengt Nordstrom who was saying that actually, if you look at it from a sort of bigger picture perspective, and if service providers start saying, well, I need to make sure that I have 2 or 3 vendors now in the in each market in case one of them lands in trouble, it might not necessarily be a good thing for the Western guys either. It might just prompt people to make sure that they don't rely on those single vendor deals anymore, which could lead to
Wind Tray, for example, seems to be all in on Ericsson.
It's
now.
gone all in on Ericsson,
Yeah.
But I mean, Bengt was
Because
saying
they'd already
that you
set
could
up
see
a
people
sort
moving away
of
from
core
that.
network thingy with them, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Huawei there. There's been some other stories. Wei, in his first week or so, has been looking at quite a lot of that, and he's got a distinct advantage over the rest of us in that he can read Chinese.
That's useful.
So, yeah, exactly. I think he's going to be our China correspondent among the many other things he's going to do.
Yeah.
And, and he was just looking at Huawei's getting increasingly bullish. So we had the thing we've chatted about on the pod before where Robert Clark interviewed Eric Xu. Is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nearly gotten confused with the head of the Communist Party there. That would have been a bit of a faux pas.
Yeah.
And he was just basically going, Marco Rubio, you suck.
Yeah.
And that was funny.
Yeah.
And not necessarily what you'd expect from him. And then there was this filing that Wei was looking at and just published a story on today where they're just methodically taking apart a lot of the arguments the Americans are saying. This is more the general national security risk thing. So there was the handset thing that we had at the start of the year. And increasingly they seem to be ratcheting it up. So Huawei hasn't been able to get sort of networking gigs in the States for ages.
Yeah.
Certainly not in the public sector anyway. But they seem to keep ratcheting up the stuff that Huawei shouldn't do, and certainly inferring to the private sector that if they want to stay on the right side of the Donald, then they better steer clear of him. And I think Huawei's just sort of had enough. And there was just some of the language it was using was quite robust.
Yeah.
So they obviously got to a stage where they think they're either exasperated or they think we've got nothing to lose.
Well, they're in a better position, aren't they? Because they're not as dependent on US components as ZTE, for one thing. And they're just a much bigger deal around the world than ZTE is, I guess. They're really locked into a lot of the big European telcos. And, they've never had that big presence in the US anyway. Since 2012, they've been sort of, the US service providers have been warned off doing business with them. So I guess all those factors give them a bit more kind of freedom to be a little bit more kind of aggressive, I suppose, in terms of
I guess so.
saying.
But some of the stuff, they even inferred that their direct competitors are basically bigging up this action against them.
Right.
So the inference is that Nokia and Ericsson are whispering in regulators' ears, going, "Yeah, why don't you give them a hard time?"
Yeah.
And they obviously don't like that very much, and they consider it sort of dirty tricks or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're also making points that we've made on the pod, which is, we're right in the middle of all this 5G stuff. We're significant whether you like it or not. Are you going to cut us out? Are you going to lose that major sort of contribution to the big picture?
Yeah, I mean, they're the if you look at how much they spend on research and development every year, it's massive. They really are the kind of vendor powerhouse. Have been for the last couple of years. So it just seems a bit ridiculous, really.
But I like it when they start actually directly having a pop.
Yeah,
and it makes as a journalist.
Yeah.
That certainly gives us stuff to write about. So I guess we'd just be waiting for some US politician to tweet back saying "shut it," or whatever.
Well, Rubio's already done that, hasn't he?
Rubio's done that. We need it to go all the way up to Trump now, don't we?
That would be great.
He starts cussing Huawei on Twitter.
Yeah, linking to like reading Telecoms.com.
And then Huawei cusses him back. That'd be great. We'll be like most other journalists and just be reporting on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that's all that, and doubtless we'll talk about it again.
No doubt, yeah.
Because the broader context is this sort of trade aggro, and that's not going to go away as well. But what else? Yeah, so
you've been covering content a bit.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Just now, I wrote a story just So we know that AT&T bought Time Warner, and probably the most significant, prominent part of Time Warner is HBO, responsible for things like The Wire and Game of Thrones and all these amazing sort of TV series. And they've now basically got all of Time Warner, and they stuck it in a bit of AT&T that's provisionally just called AT&T Entertainment.
Yeah.
And they've got this AT&T lifer, I've forgotten his name. Can you remember? It doesn't matter. Who's been in charge of? Yeah, I'll look up my own story. Who's been in charge of things like DirecTV in the past, and so he's definitely got some experience on the TV and content side of things. But he's a telecoms guy. Anyway, they stuck him in charge of all this Time Warner stuff, and now he's just straight away. The thing only cleared about 2 or 3 weeks ago. He's gone on sort of general tour and done some what America's called town halls, which basically is large meetings, as far as I can tell, with all these things that they've just bought. And he recently did one at HBO, and I think New York Times got hold of a recording of it. And he basically went up to HBO, all the great and good of HBO, this amazing sort of creative force, and went, right, from now on, I just want more hours. I want more people viewing more HBO stuff more of the time. Which in principle is a fair aspiration, and he gave quite boring, prosaic business reasons, such as more hours means more data, which means more.
It's not John Stankey, is it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Warner Media, CEO Warner Media.
Oh, they're calling it Warner Media. I didn't think they were going to keep any of the Time Warner.
That's what they've got it down at the moment on their board of directors page.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, well, he's the guy anyway.
Yeah.
And he just came out and he's quite brutal about it. He's just basically going, I want more and more hours of time, and very, very quantitative. Right. So for me, HBO has always been a qualitative thing. I don't know what the numbers are, but we know that.
That's interesting because it sounds like the Netflix approach to programming, doesn't it, to a certain extent?
Well, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
No.
But Netflix still spends tons of money.
Yeah.
So it doesn't cut corners. So that's the biggest worry. I have got no problem with him getting all quantitative in and of itself, but something's got to give. If you want more and more and more eyeballs, but you're not going to significantly increase the budget, then presumably you'll get a drop off in quality. That's what's happened in journalism for about the past 20 years, because there are less journalists and they're asked to produce more content thanks to the internet. The average quality, with the exception of us, of course, here.
Of course.
The average quality of a piece of content's gone down because we're only human. Yeah. If we've got to produce twice as much stuff, each thing's going to be half as good. And so that's a concern there. And I think not only is that a concern because I love a lot of HBO content, but I just can't see how that would make business sense.
I think
either.
It's very odd that they've. I wasn't aware of this until you did your story, but. And were telling me about it earlier, but I think it's weird that they've kind of weighed in at such an early stage.
They've really steamed
with
in
this,
as well.
With that kind of approach, because I think a lot of people would have hoped that they'd be very careful about something like HBO, which, as you say, has produced some of the best programs in the world for the last few years, and obviously has a formula that works in terms of churning out quality content. Why come along and risk that immediately with this let's go for quantity over quality approach?
It seems heavy-handed, and the headline I went with was if it ain't broke, fix it anyway.
Yeah.
And then just clicking through on that, I'll give you some of the quotes just to give you a sense of quite how sort of full. Now, obviously, this wasn't meant for public consumption, but then again, it seems like a bit of a coincidence that the New York Times got hold of a recording so soon after it was done. Normally, leaks are choreographed, aren't they? They're not just some spy in there with a voice recorder. And he goes, and he's talking about how we need more and more hours. And he goes, and why are more hours of engagement important? Because you get more data and information about a customer that then allows you to do things like monetize through alternate models of advertising as well as subscriptions, which is why I think is very important to play in tomorrow's world. Now I sort of think that's not great rabble. It's not going to raise the morale, is it?
No.
I want more data so that we can have more novel forms of monetization. It's like, woo!
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that. And what he's basically saying is I want to get better at exploiting our customers, which is kind of what people who are cynical about the deal were wondering in the
by,
first
by
place.
bombarding them with possibly low quality content.
Yeah, and then harvesting their data
Yeah.
and doing all kinds of shady stuff with it.
Yeah.
Not that I'm inferring they'd do anything that wasn't completely above board, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was funny. And
so he was Stanky. What's his background at AT&T? Was he?
He'd done a lot of stuff with DirecTV
Right.
after they bought that.
See, because things haven't been going great at DirecTV, have they? I think they've lost. Didn't they
Right.
lose?
Could be.
A little bit
I
like
haven't been
BT,
keeping an eye
haven't
on
they?
the
Lost
numbers.
some video customers.
Yeah, he's not
I'll have to
necessarily
look at the numbers, but it would make you worried certainly if as I think I read that they'd sort of been losing some video subscribers.
Yeah.
And then this guy's kind of come along and sort of taken charge of Time Warner, which has had a really successful formula.
Well, quite, and the fear always was that if you put some suit, and I'm sure this guy Stanky's got all kinds of great credentials and he's a top exec and all that sort of thing, but for the sake of my illustration, let's just call him a suit.
Yeah.
You put some suit in front of creatives, and don't let that's what I found most remarkable about output coming mainly from the US, but there've been some other good stuff around the world that they clearly have just let the creatives run with it.
Yeah.
You can tell, even like big blockbuster movies, like whether it's Avengers, one of the better ones versus one of the worst ones, you always feel like the creatives, they've just gone, go for it.
Yeah.
Here's your budget, here's your license, do what you do. Whereas when the suits start going, no, I think you should make Thor twirl his hammer the other way,
Yeah.
just because I'm the exec and I can impose my will, then they're just going to completely corrupt the whole creative process. I'm sure it's not
I think
quite
that's true
crude
with
as that.
TV, but that's not true with movies.
What?
Like what you just said, I think that's
that
true.
they let the
TV.
creatives
Yeah,
go. Yeah, they're probably better in TV, and most
Yeah.
of the best content has been TV rather than movies. So
Yeah.
perhaps picking a sort of Marvel film wasn't the best illustration.
Mm.
But it still backs up my point, which is if they start doing that with TV, then I think the output will suffer as a consequence.
Well, the other risk is that people, the creatives at Time Warner, decide that they've had enough and they want to sort of go somewhere else. That's because people start to think about moving, don't they? When deals like this happen,
Indeed.
you start to go, well, hang on a minute, is this a company I really want to work for? Have you got some guy?
Well, and that's your time to
wading in and
renegotiate
go,
as well,
yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
We want huge amounts of quantity. Just keep churning stuff out. I can imagine that making some of the creative types at Time Warner go, hang on a minute, maybe I shouldn't be working for this company anymore.
Yeah, and they seem to want to. One of the reasons he's come out with it is he's obviously said it in his sights. Right, we're going to take on Netflix.
Yeah, which they've talked about a lot in trying to justify the deal in the first place, haven't they?
What's funny is that the Netflix stock actually went up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought, oh, this is not good for the stock, but it actually went up.
What you mean when it got cleared and when it went through?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's hard to imagine taking on Netflix straight on.
Yeah.
So they've all got their benefits. So Netflix is standalone. They don't have anything else. AT&T obviously wants to use some of this content traffic to drive other analytics and clever ways of rinsing people.
Yeah.
Then you've got people like Disney. They've got their certain thing, especially in the sort of kiddie programming, and they own Marvel as well, don't they?
Yeah.
They own Star Wars as well, I think they do. Yeah, so they're really good at that summer blockbuster stuff. And then you've got Amazon, which is basically tacking on, it's just investing in video content just to sweeten the pot for Prime membership primarily.
Yeah, Netflix is almost at its all-time highest right now.
Its share price.
I find it a bit strange. I mean, it comes back to this sort of strategic rationale for the deal, but I find it a bit odd in a way that they've seen Netflix as a competitor. I mean, they have their TV business with DirecTV, but it's relatively, it's not small, but Netflix isn't a network operator. Netflix is a good thing for network operators because it means people need higher speed connections.
Well,
in their
so
homes.
there we have this conflict of interest now,
and this is why there is now. But it's almost strange that AT&T felt Netflix is a big challenge, and other operators in other markets would say, "Well, hang on, Netflix is a company worth doing deals with and partnerships because people have to have fiber connections to watch Netflix."
But if you've got now a division you just spent $1 zillion on, and this whole thing, that quote I gave you, he wants share of viewing time. Let's say your average US person's viewing time in a given day is 8 hours, which seems quite a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
But, okay,
is
4
that what
hours.
they say?
Well, no, I'm just pulling numbers out of my
Let's
arse.
go for 4.
Let's go for. We'll go for 4 hours.
Somebody who's employed.
Yeah. And then they're either watching Netflix or they're watching HBO. I think is what he's saying. So that's why Netflix is a direct competitor, because there's only so many hours in the day.
Don't forget Amazon.
It is now.
Before, whoever.
Before this deal was done.
I take your point. So now they're conflicted, because Netflix is fine from the network side, especially if they can, charge them for premium service or whatever.
Yeah.
But then it's competitor for that other bit. And we know we can have big companies like Samsung that can have businesses that operate in quite different areas, and it somehow works. But it's not necessarily easy to pull off.
Yeah.
Maybe Netflix needs to stop charging for extra for 4K.
Right.
Amazon is like, if you want something 4K, if it's in 4K, it's the same price. I mean, it's all one price. But Netflix, you have to pay extra for 4K. Right. So maybe they feel like, they're getting a bit more from streaming 4K. Why don't we get it as well? I don't know.
That's the other concern, is they're going to just try and copy Netflix, like literally try and outdo Netflix. Maybe even just go on a hiring spree. Let's say some of these Time Warner execs clear off, like you say, and then they try and replace them all with Netflix execs in that classic way of like, let's go headhunting everyone.
One interesting thing would be to see how much is Netflix spending on content each year. It's billions.
They just hoiked it up. It's 10, I think it's over 10 billion.
It's over 10 billion a year.
10 to 12,
so it'd be interesting
like
to see what AT&T is spending on content each year, and then if it was going to try to really go head to head with Netflix on spending, what that would do for
whether it's got any money left after buying it.
Yeah.
So I don't think HBO spends, even with Game of Thrones, I don't think they spend anywhere near as much as Netflix on content. I think I read that somewhere.
See, I wonder how much Netflix makes from product placements as well, because the main source of revenue is obviously from the
subscription.
Yeah. But what about like advertising? Because there's no advertising on the page or pre-rolls and all that stuff. What about product placement?
You mean like a sort of...
Because there is that.
A dragon with a Coca-Cola logo on its arse.
No, but in like the new...
People wearing Nike shoes.
The Jerry Seinfeld comedians in cars getting coffee. There's like product placement.
Your example was better.
I just want any excuses to be a bit rude. I imagine how much it's relatively minor, but it's probably something. I mean, as you say, their share price is still going up, and they've never made any money. They're always losing money, aren't they? But it's like
a bit
Amazon
like Tesla.
Model.
Yeah. People say it's worth 0.
But it's doing all right.
Well, mentioning Amazon as the other one in the kind of picture, which is not seen to have made as big a deal about its sort of content side, has it? It's much smaller than
it went
Netflix,
it got a bit of buzz around that Clarkson, that Top Gear thing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing they've done that Netflix doesn't seem to have done outside, well, not that I'm aware of anyway, outside the US to a significant extent, but Amazon's sort of pushing a bit more into the sports market, aren't they? With, I mean, they had Queens, they were screening Queens, for example, the tennis tournament that's to kind of build up to Wimbledon. In the run up to Wimbledon, and then they had Eastbourne as well, which is an even smaller grass court event. And I think from
which only you care about.
But I think from later this year they've got all the tennis. They've acquired the rights from Sky. All the ATP stuff is going to Amazon, including the US Open. So
it'd be interesting to see what BT thinks about that. I noticed. I was checking out.
Well, they might still have WTA stuff, BT, but all the ATP stuff.
I've noticed they got some MMA because I was checking out. There was a big UFC thing this weekend.
No, Saturday, sorry.
And I was doing that usual thing of going onto YouTube to try and watch it for free.
Yeah.
You're like getting ahead of their sort of.
You were up at 4 a.m.
algorithm. No, this is the next day.
The next day.
But sometimes you can get stuff on, and there's a little window before it gets taken down for breaching copyright. Which reminds me of another story I wrote about this week, which I'll mention. And I just noticed there was a BT logo at the bottom of that, so they obviously had that MMA. So there's obviously a lot of battle over the sort of long tail sport as well.
Have you heard about this? The best story ever was one guy was streaming it, and to not get taken down, he was pretending to play video game. So he was like, one of those like video game YouTube videos. He was pretending to be playing like Mayweather against McGregor.
Well, I'll mention that other thing, and then we might talk a bit about sport, as we said. But that other thing was last week I wrote about a thing. I don't think you were aware of this, Ian. Maybe you're too busy gallivanting around Transylvania.
Probably.
But there was a big vote for a new sort of European directive that was going to basically oblige internet companies, certainly social media publishing platforms, to be a lot more aggressive about protecting the copyright of any content that goes up on it. Now, in principle, you'd think that's fine. Like a lot of musicians have been pissed off about the amount of their stuff gets watched on YouTube without getting them seeing a penny of it. But this was getting more into like memes and mashups and people who just use little clips for a laugh, or satirize it, or comment on things like like you were just saying with games. There were lots of people, as ever with any big issue, it was polarised. So there are people saying it's going to break the internet.
Yeah.
Whenever you get any regulation on the internet, it's going to break the internet. The only other thing that breaks the internet that often seems to be Kim Kardashian's arse.
Yeah.
So it's going to break the internet because you couldn't do memes anymore. You couldn't do mashups. You couldn't do all these clever little creative things that people do with clips and images and all that sort of thing. And on the other side, you had the rights holders who were all like, well, about time too. And there was lots of campaigning, and Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia, he was very much anti this thing. So was Google. So were the big internet platforms, because they were going to be, Wikipedia. Who's going? Can Wikipedia be Wikipedia?
Yeah.
And Europe came back and went, no, it's all right. We've got an exemption for you. And he's going, oh, that's not good enough. It can't just be an exemption for us. Anyway, cut long story short, they lost the vote.
Right.
Which I've got to feel, I didn't really have a horse in the race, but I'm kind of pleased.
Yeah.
Just because it looked like an example of Europe just going, right, we're going to just throw our weight around here. We're gonna put some quite heavy-handed regulation and legislation down and hang the consequences. And so now at least they've got to go off, talk about it some more, reconvene in September, and maybe have some more nuances to it. So on the whole, I'm happy. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that copyright... Let's say I was a more creative person than I am, and I'd done something...
It seems that it's not enforceable at all. It's just too vast.
Well, there's the practical, logistical side of it as well. But then you get into sort of algorithms. So like you get things like me trying to find these UFC clips before YouTube takes them down. There was a story I just saw today. I didn't write it up. It's just funny. Some bloke YouTube's taken copyright action against him for putting up his own stuff.
I saw that.
Yeah, so the algorithm was so flawed that it didn't detect that he was using his own material. So there's some kind of automatic, if it's at all copyright, then we just steam in, take it down and ask questions later, which is very heavy-handed. Another thing I've spoken about lots of times again on YouTube is this demonetization. So most people on YouTube count on Google serving ads on their video content for them to make it like a fraction of a penny per view. But, you get someone like PewDiePie and you're getting millions of views, that all adds up. And they're increasingly demonetizing people because they're worried about, big brands, family brands like Coca-Cola or Disney or whatever. They're worried about their ads being served against anything that's at all dodgy, bigoted, crazy, violent, sexual, whatever.
Yeah.
So they're increasingly just demonetizing first and asking questions later. Like YouTubers that I like to watch who talk about sort of politics and current affairs and are not in any way out of order, but might sometimes use language in context that needs to be discussed, maybe sexist or racist or something. But they're talking about the manifestations of it and what to do about it. They're not going yay for racism. But I think the algorithm just picks it up and goes, nah, too dodgy.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing. Google likes to think, well, and I'm sure it is, it's full of all these boffins who can recite pi to 1,000,000 digits, but they haven't quite got the hang of the algorithm game, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Google has still got some work to be
It's
done
applying
there.
algorithms to things that they're not really ready for, isn't it, I suppose?
Well, things that aren't just numerical, I guess.
Yeah.
They're qualitative.
AI and some of this stuff to get ahead of itself. And
the real good natural language processing and really understanding context and nuance and that sort of thing.
The volume is so enormous.
Yes. And people don't want a delay. People want to be able to upload without having to have it be in moderation
Your
for
video is being reviewed. Give it 6 months. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not. It's just a manifestation of technology being used when the human factor is still important. But it's not too dissimilar to going into a supermarket and getting stuck on one of those nasty scanner machines that just won't let you scan something and. Or you try and buy a bottle of beer and you're in a hurry and you have to wait for 30 minutes for the guy to come over and sort of approve it.
Confirm that you're over 21.
Over 21. But, it's
yeah, I get that all the time. He has to give me a good long look as well. Yes, okay, cool. We were going to talk about sport. I think we'll go off on a complete tangent because there's so much cool sport going on. The big one.
We're out of time.
What are we talking about? You're still in the World Cup. Yeah. So that's the big one. It's the World Cup. So at time,
there goes our American audience. Who
didn't even qualify. Sorry. So we're now at the semi-finals of the World Cup, and both England and France are still in it. Yeah. And we could have England and France meeting in the final. So we've got to beat Croatia. You've got to beat Belgium, haven't you?
Yeah, that's. It's slightly tougher for us, I would say.
I think so. Yeah, Belgium's pretty handy.
Yeah.
No, I think that. I mean, we knew as soon as when we had that game against Belgium, who were in our group, but it was both like B teams. Everyone knew. Well, but everyone knew that it was actually to our advantage to lose because then we're going to be in the bottom half of the draw, which didn't have that many decent teams left in it, did it?
Yeah, but
it had Spain in it.
Yeah, it was a surprise that Spain went out. Yeah,
but they're not the Spain of old.
Yeah, it turned out that they weren't. But
yeah,
I mean,
there's Russia who aren't that
this
good.
This football's been full of upsets, though, hasn't it? This World Cup. I mean, it's.
So there's no South American teams at all.
You're on the 3 days rest for the final side. We're on the 4 days rest. That could be a big difference.
I see. Okay.
Especially
you're playing on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
All right.
So I mean, if it depends, you know, if we play Tuesday night, but we play 2 hours, you play Wednesday night, and you breeze over Croatia, then you'll probably be just as rested as we are. But in the end, I don't know. If we breeze over Belgium and then you struggle to beat Croatia, then we'll have a big advantage. I don't know. And then whoever loses on Wednesday has to play on Saturday
in the sort of the loser game.
So 2 days rest.
It's a slightly pointless game now, isn't it?
Yeah,
I don't want to do that. But.
So Iain, who do you want to win out of Belgium and France in that semi-final? Who, if we got through, would you want England to play in the final?
Well, it'd probably be more exciting if they play France, wouldn't it?
It would be. It'd be more exciting if we beat them and more gutting if we lost.
I would want to play England in the final. Same way I wanted to play Brazil.
Yeah, that's because you think England are rubbish, though.
No, because I mean, of the two, I think Croatia. It's like I don't know.
There isn't the excitement.
We'll be such a favourite against Croatia. That will be.
I didn't really want to play Russia in the semi-final because I thought it might be a bit sort of politically charged.
Yeah,
even though they would probably be on paper the easier team to beat, but I think Belgium is probably. I think we'd have a slightly better chance against them than against France, perhaps, and if we got into the final. But I think it'd be more exciting.
I think we'd be
France.
All of Belgium plays for England in England.
Yeah, well, they know the players. That's the thing.
Well, if it was England versus Belgium in the final, it'd be half the Spurs team there for starters.
And then there's a few in Belgium too. Yeah,
that's what I meant. If it was England versus Belgium and the whole lineup, I think England France final would just be amazing.
It'd be great.
Yeah,
for England, London is the third French city.
Yeah,
fourth.
Right. Yeah. Well, we can't. You keep reminding us of that, don't you?
Yeah.
Just by turning up.
There's two of us.
Do you think that's the ideal final?
Pierre, if it's an England-France final, do you think we'll be able to be civil towards each other?
I don't think I'll go. If England wins, I'm not coming to the office for like a week. Let it cool down a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm not inclined to gloat, but I couldn't guarantee there wouldn't be some gloating, and vice versa. You'd be inclined to gloat.
It depends. But if you guys win, I hope it's a straight win. No, I don't want it to be a dodgy penalty.
No,
it has to be clean.
Yeah.
England dominated France.
Yeah, like the Sweden game where that was a nice straight up win.
Exactly. If it's like a dodgy, that was a dive, and we're not going to hear the end of it.
No. Do you know what? Actually, talking about diving, watching that England-Sweden game, because neither English or Swedish are that big on diving.
No.
And it's such a contrast between watching the games involving the Latin American countries. I'm sorry to generalise, but it's true.
Yeah.
All of them, Argentina, Uruguay, in the Colombia game there was lots of it.
That was the worst.
And of course Neymar's the absolute worst.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, he's become the source. Talking about memes, there's so many memes about Neymar.
So many memes. Yeah.
It's just the amount of times no one's been anywhere near him and he's been flapping about like a landed salmon.
You see Maradona said that England had robbed Colombia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely great.
I mean, to be fair, like they went ahead in a penalty shootout. I mean,
we nearly.
Who wasn't for that awful penalty the guy took?
I know, and Eric Dyer, Spurs player, fair play to him stepping up and.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean,
but the man of the tournament for us has got to be Pickford, hasn't it? The goalkeeper.
Yeah, he did pull off an amazing save in the Colombia penalty shootout as well.
No, he also against Sweden, didn't he?
Oh yeah, against Sweden he did. A couple of saves of his were.
Yeah.
Not penalties.
No, he kept us in
as well.
I mean, we dominated the game, but it could easily have been 2-2.
It's funny that he was getting some stick earlier on in the tournament, though, wasn't he? After one of the group stage
I thought
matches.
Sweden was really tired. They looked really slow, really out of wind.
Yeah, they did. I agree.
Right.
They didn't look very good to me
Ray.
at
I
all.
said,
did you watch it?
I did.
Yeah, I didn't think
really
Sweden looked
slow
very
moving
good.
forward. Yeah.
I mean, I think I obviously want England to win, and I don't want to sound negative, and like I often am, but I sort of feel England have been a bit lucky, really.
No,
with the draw,
considering
and
the draw.
The draw's really gone their way. You're right. They've only really played one quality side, and they lost to them.
Usually, like a world champion has to beat at least a big nation leading up to the final.
We will. Oh,
but
leading
I
up to
think
the
the
final,
World
right.
Cup's
Yeah.
overdue some team that's not particularly good winning it. It's
So
happened in the Euros
does
when
Croatia,
Greece won.
does Croatia
It's
not
going to
count
happen
then?
this time with England.
But
winning.
Greece beat us. We were the,
Yeah,
the
but they-
world
they
champion when they beat us.
Yeah.
No, we weren't.
I don't know how
actually,
they did it though. That Euros that they won because they weren't a
Yeah,
great side.
they were at
were
home.
But
So I had a mate who
Yeah.
I'm meeting later on, and Gavs, if you listen to this podcast, you're getting your first call out. When that Greece European, I think was it Europeans, wasn't it?
yeah, it was.
He,
2006,
It was in Portugal.
Was
he
it?
was in a pub
2004.
Four, sorry.
talking to
Yeah.
some mates, and we grew up in North London, so we've got quite a lot of Anglo-Greek mates, and one of them was gobbing off about Greece doing well, and he went, "I'll give you 100 to 1." And bloke went, "Done." And then a couple of days later, he went, "I want to put another quid," and Gavril was still doing this bravado. So basically, and we were off on a stag trip in Edinburgh when this final was happening, and when Greece won, everyone knew that Gavril had taken 2 quid at 100 to 1 off some bloke, which was very funny. Not for him.
And they beat Portugal on their home turf in the
Yeah.
final. That
No,
was a
fair
big
play
thing.
to 'em.
The same
Anything
way
can happen.
Portugal beat us on our home turf. 2 years
Anything can
ago.
happen. So, before we run out of time, quick
Yeah.
one, Wimbledon's also on. Iain, you're our resident tennis fanatic. Women's draw, pretty much all the seeds are out.
All the top 10 players are out in the women's side,
Yeah.
which is, I think, unprecedented. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Right.
But Serena Williams is still in it,
Yeah,
obviously.
and she's looking pretty handy,
She's
isn't
pretty
she?
good.
So
So I
let's
think
give it
she's,
to her already.
I think she's probably going to win
And
that.
we've got this amazing narrative of her just coming back from having a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
I mean, she looked not quite back to match fitness when she was playing in the French Open. I think she had to withdraw, but
Right.
she's looking really good again at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
Men's can't really see past Federer at the moment, the way he's playing, even though
No.
he's like 37 years old nearly.
It just looks imperious, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
just makes it look like he's playing a different sport. Because the
There's-
economy of movement he has.
Mm.
Yeah, all the points
That's
are so
the
short.
word,
and-
economy of
yeah,
movement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just someone whacks it and he's just there going,
Yeah.
yes.
Also, his face, he never
Yeah,
he's
he doesn't
complete-
break
like
a
a
sweat.
robot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas
Too
unlike
easy.
Djokovic, I was watching a bit of Djokovic
Yeah, he's
against
the opposite.
Carl Edmund. Well, he's always been capable of getting pumped up, but he used to be quite calm, and then he's had this break. There've been sort of rumours about some ups and downs going on with him personally. And now he's come back and he seems to be wearing his heart on his sleeve
He's
a lot more.
angry.
He's
Yeah.
shouting at the crowd, he's
Yeah.
sort of muttering to himself. He doesn't seem as together as he was before, but he still played great against
Yeah.
Edmund, didn't he?
I think with no British players left in it, what everybody would love to see is it's 10 years to the
Nadal,
day,
Federer.
would be Nadal Federer
Oh,
again.
yeah.
Are they
Well, they're the number 1 and 2 seeds. and
Okay.
Nadal often doesn't do well at Wimbledon these days.
So they
it seems
could
to
be in
be
the
quite
final.
tough for him. But they
and you're
could-
right, it's 10 years since the
could
greatest
win the
final
final.
ever.
Yeah, pretty much.
And they're the world number 1 and 2 again. 10 years
Okay.
on, no one ever saw that
Oh
coming.
my
10
God.
years on, these guys are still 1 and 2 in the world.
Apologies to anyone listening. By the time this goes up, they might have both been knocked out.
Possibly.
But this is what we were hoping before
Yeah.
either of them be knocked
If
out.
they're in the final, it's going to be very hard to decide splitting your time between Wimbledon and the World Cup because they're scheduled at the same time.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, but you
Wimbledon will
wouldn't care
not
'cause
shift
England
the
won't
time
be
of the final. So yeah, it's probably
Yeah.
not going to be an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, better to have too much sport than too
Yeah.
little.
2 screens is what you need.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
and your
then
phone
there's
and a
the
tablet.
Silverstone as well. No,
Yeah,
that's
no one cares
That
about
was
that.
yesterday.
Yeah.
No one cares
Forget
about
about that.
Formula 1. Okay. We're done, I think. Okay. Thanks a lot for listening. Make sure you join us for the next one.